which is a very classic European architecture. And this building originally was something quite unexpected. It looks very fancy, right? Very big, but it was something quite unexpected for what it looks like. So I want to know from you guys, what do you guys think it was this originally?
A government building.
Government building, but something unexpected. Like last week someone said a brothel. That's unexpected. Not a brothel, but could be.
Could be.
Opera house, maybe?
Hospital.
Opera house.
Or theater?
Hospital.
Hospital would be interesting, yeah.
Looks
Or
like a
theater.
hospital.
This was the very first public school of São Paulo.
Oh.
And you know, public schools, they have much less infrastructure. They're much like smaller than this. This is very fancy. So I think it's quite interesting that they decided to make this. And actually they decided to make it like this because we had an elite living here in São Paulo, some very rich people coming to São Paulo at that time that this was made. And they wanted to show off how São Paulo was rich, how São Paulo was powerful. So they built this to really show how São Paulo is a very important city in the country of Brazil. Talking about Brazil, we were colonized by the Portuguese. They come here in 1500s. And first they come to the north of Brazil, to the state of Bahia. And they make Salvador, the capital city of the Bahia state, the first capital of Brazil. So Salvador was their original capital, the very first one. Then they come by the sea here to this area. And if you come from the sea to São Paulo, you have to go a long way up. We're quite above sea level. So they were climbing up a long way. They get here and finally it's a bit more flat. So they're like, wow, nice. Let's make a post here so we can rest every time we go from the sea towards the inland, because we're exploring the country. So that's how São Paulo started, as like a little village just to people to rest before continuing the travels. All right? If you have any questions, let me know. And the only rule we have is, of course, pickpocketing can happen in places. So just keep an eye on your phone. When we talk about a typical food from here, it's hard to say because it's food from all around. But here is the birthplace of the sandwich called Bauru. It's a sandwich that is famous all around Brazil. Bauru. Yeah, I will write later. I will give you guys recommendations. I can write it down for you. And Bauru is a sandwich: salad, ham, cheese, and pork. And it's the very first Bauru was done there. So it's quite a touristic spot for us, for São Paulo and from other places, because the very first one was done here. And of course, Bauru nowadays it's all around. So here will be a touristic place. They have a ranking showing the best sandwiches in the world. Where is Bauru on the rank? We're not so high, but we're there. But because of that, it will be double the price of a normal Bauru. You can also eat Bauru on the bakery. Yeah, that's it.
This is the Bauru.
Yeah, this is Bauru. And you can also eat Bauru on the next door bakery, because there will be half the price because it's not touristic. So also you can eat in any bakery Bauru. You can ask for it around. And here we have this statue, which is called the Black Mother, and it's a statue representing a white nurse, or the woman who would breastfeed the baby of the lord of the farm. Because at that time of slavery, they thought that breastfeeding was disgusting, because the man would be like, oh, I don't want my wife to breastfeed because she would get saggy breasts, they were weird at the time. But anyways, they would get a slave who had a baby, she would breastfeed their baby, and she would also become, most of the times, the full-time nanny, she would raise the child, basically. This was the very first statue of a black person in São Paulo. Nowadays we have 4 statues of black people. We're a bit lacking representation because more than half of the population is black. We're getting there. And I think it's very cool because this statue was made in 1910. And it's very nice that it was made representing a mother, I think. A mother, a woman. Because we say that the mother of Brazil is a black woman, because a lot of our culture is influenced by African. But we don't learn about that so much in school sometimes. So I think it's very cool we have this in the city center. And this church here is the church that was from the slaves. The slaves would go to this church, and the white people would go to another one, because at that time they wanted to separate. And this is called the Church of the Rosary of the Black Man. We're gonna go inside, and you guys can see it has statues of black saints from Brazil. Because quite a few people, of course, black people became Catholic, and some of them became saints. So here inside we have some of the statues of black saints. They're on the sides, and it's also a very South American church. You will see very colorful, very soft colors. It's very nice.
So the guide was saying that this church used to be a church that the African slaves used to use. As she mentioned, Brazil was colonized by the Portuguese, and one of the things they did is they brought slaves from other colonies that they colonized in Africa, for example Angola and Mozambique, and then they brought them in Brazil. And so this church apparently was used specifically for slaves. And she said that one of the interesting things about the church is that some of the statues of the saints are of black people. So we can see here an example of some black saints over there. You can see there's actually 3 black saints over there. So that's quite an interesting thing to see, that they honored the slaves that were brought here as saints. And it's quite a colorful church, as you can see in the domes. Very colorful and beautiful as well. There's also some nice stained glass. So yeah, that's the church.
That's because São Paulo and Brazil in general in 1920s, when this was built, was really looking to the US as like a role model, you know, like, oh, US had just helped with the First World War. It was really hyped at the time. So São Paulo was like, if Brazil is like the US, we are like New York. We are the financial center, we have the stock exchange here, so we are gonna make a very similar building to the Empire State, of a copy kind of. And this was the Bank of the State of São Paulo. So it was a bank, and now it's not a bank anymore. It's a cultural center called Farol Santander. And because it's rented by Santander Bank to become a cultural center, you can go inside for 35 reais, and inside they have a cultural expositions, they have a restaurant, a coffee, they have a skate park, which is quite random, and they also, you can go to the top to see the view. It's nice because it's very famous for us from São Paulo. It's very iconic. If you say, oh, I went to the Farol Santander, Banespão, everyone will know. And on top we have this flag, which is also quite similar to the US flag, right? You know, stripes, a red corner. This flag was meant to be the national flag of Brazil when we became a republic. So a guy here in São Paulo was like, let's change the flag, let's make a new flag for Brazil. He made this flag, but everyone else was like, no, we don't want to change the flag, you know, let's keep the old flag, no changing. So the state of São Paulo adopted this flag to be the state of São Paulo flag. So it's our state's flag nowadays. We're very proud as a state. We really love to say, oh, we're from São Paulo. So we're gonna see all of this flag on the tour, on some parts, on some public buildings. And you can see it was really meant to be a national flag because on the red square we have the shape of Brazil inside. We can see from here, but when we're closer you will see. The red square has like a shape of Brazil. So it was really meant to be a national flag, not a state flag. And here we have another one of the FLM. Yeah, so it's many. It's quite 3, but if we went around the center, we would see more of them. Quite a few. And next to the white building, we have this pink building, the big skyscraper, pink one. This one was the first skyscraper of São Paulo, and it was built by Martinelli. The name of this building is Martinelli Building. Martinelli was an Italian. So many Italians came here to São Paulo and to Brazil after slavery ended, mainly because they wanted to make the country whiter, and also because they wanted to bring like knowledge from the European surface makers, you know, bring more people. And Martinelli was a very poor builder in Italy, but when he got here to Brazil, he started to work with exportation and importation. So he got rich very fast. And he was like, I will build the first skyscraper of Brazil, of São Paulo. It was for São Paulo because Rio had one before us. But he was like, I'll build one, and then they were like, Martinelli, how big are you gonna make it? And he was like, 10 floors tall. We're like, 10 floors? Come on, you can do much better than this. So he said, okay, I'll do one with 12 floors. And then he got to 14 floors, 16, 18, and at 20 floors, the city of São Paulo is like, no, stop, it's too dangerous, you don't have the permits for this, you can't build anymore. So he was like, I will just build my house on top, and then I stop. And then he built these 4 extra floors, which are his penthouse, which is the light pink part. So he got to 24 floors, he cheated the system. And nowadays, this is the Secretary of Habitation and Secretary of Sports of the city of São Paulo. So it became a public building.
Apparently these buildings that have this FLM are buildings that have been taken over by a group called FLM. So it's buildings that are abandoned that get taken over, and then they either rent out the rooms, or they try and give some of the apartments or to families to live in for free. So apparently there's a lot of these, and it's part of in the constitution of Brazil. Everybody has a right to have a house, so they can't really do anything about these groups that take over these abandoned buildings. But now we're going towards this way. There's this big white building in the middle that you can see, and apparently it was built with the Empire State Building in mind. So it was the whole design, they kind of copied the Empire State Building, and it used to be the Brazilian or Brazil Central Bank, but now it's been converted into more of a tourist building with restaurants and observatory deck. But what's interesting is that the flag at the top, or the official flag of São Paulo, looks like the American flag. So it's also one of the things that they did to try and be a little bit more Americanized here. So you can actually see the flag right at the top. It's hard to see, but yeah. And then this building on the right is called the Martinelli building, and it was the first skyscraper built in São Paulo. There are some old looking mansions here to the left and also to the right hand side, with very different architectural styles. Look at the style of this one. That's now seems to be a restaurant. Very interesting style. And then you have this one that's got a Gothic style. So it looks like the center also had mansions back in the day.
And this was a church, which still works as a church, and this was a religious school that was meant to teach the native Brazilians about Catholicism, because the Catholic Church really wanted to get more followers in South America. Nowadays, there's a museum called Pátio do Colégio, which is a museum mostly about sacred art. It has some history parts, but mostly sacred art from that time, the colonial times. It's quite cheap, it's 15 reais. Otherwise, on Tuesdays it's free. So if you're here on Tuesday, you can go inside for free. And yeah, but most of it is sacred art, and most of it is in Portuguese. So it's worth going if you have the time and if you're really into sacred art. And talking about Brazil quickly, about the history of Brazil, we were colonized by the Portuguese, and the main aim was to bring all the resources from Brazil to Portugal. So for 200 years, that's all that happened. You know, the only thing that happened in Brazil was bringing the resources from Brazil to Portugal. But that changed in 1800s when Napoleon is invading Europe. He gets to Portugal, and the royal family of Portugal knows they're going to become prisoners of Napoleon. So they decide to flee. They get a royal court, and they come to Brazil, and they make Brazil the capital of the Portuguese Empire. That was a very new thing to happen in the Americas, you know. And that was cool because they made a lot of developments, you know, social developments. They made Brazil really a country. They improved our economy a lot. They made universities. They opened the ports for us to have business with other nations. So that made Brazilians here very happy. But in 1850, Napoleon is defeated, and they have to return to Lisbon. They have to go back to the capital, to Portugal. And the Brazilians are very afraid of what's going to happen. Are we going to become just a colony again? Are we going to lose our privileges? Are they going to close the ports with other nations to have business? So the oldest son of the king, the Portuguese king, his name was Dom Pedro I. He stayed here in Brazil to take care of the colony, to make sure everything would be fine. And people were like, you know what, Dom Pedro, if you make Brazil independent, you'll be the king. You'll be the boss, you rule everyone. Dom Pedro was not so sure of that, but his wife, she was a Habsburg. Her name was Maria Leopoldina, and she was an Austrian princess. She was like, let's do it, you know, let's make Brazil independent. I'm gonna be the queen, I'm up for it. So she really pressures Dom Pedro, And in 1822, he proclaims the independence of Brazil on the 7th of September. And Portugal knows it's going to be a big fight with Brazil to try to stop them. So they're like, okay, whatever. And Dom Pedro becomes our king. So we were the only monarchy in the Americas to ever exist. And Dom Pedro is a good king. He managed to keep Brazil together as one, because while the Spanish colonies all ended up getting like smaller, you know, because they got independence in different parts, in different moments, here in Brazil, Dom Pedro went around making sure all states would be one and not try to get independent. So that's why we're so big. But it had some problems. One is that we had a war with Paraguay, which we won, but it was a war, we spent a lot of resources, we like wasted a lot of people, many people died, and that made the popularity of Dom Pedro go low. And two, he was a big lover. He was famous for loving too much, you know. He would be seen jumping out of his mistress' windows, he would have many bastard children, he would have affairs with like a lot of people, which was very scandalous. And in a very conservative society, very Catholic country, this was even worse. So that made his popularity go lower. And in 1830s, people go to him and tell him, Dom Pedro, you have to step down from the throne, you have to give up for being the king. Otherwise, we're going to have a civil war, because many people don't want you as the king anymore. So he steps down from the throne, he goes back to Europe, to Portugal, and his son, who is 5 years old, becomes the king of Brazil, Dom Pedro II.
Nice looking old mansion. There's another one next door as well. It's very similar to Europe. Now it seems like it's Secretary of Justice. So in the story that she was talking about with the King of Brazil, Dom Pedro, she mentioned that he had a lot of mistresses, and now she's going to take us to one of the house of one of his mistresses that's very famous. So we'll have a look at how that house looks like and where his mistress was. It looks like it's this one here. I know, maybe it's further down. Let's keep going this way and see where that old house is. This is the house that the mistress lived in.
So this is the house of the Monsumo lover. I think it's closed because of the holidays. I forgot about that. So her name was Marquesa de Santos, or Domitila, that's what her title. And she was very famous, not only for being the lover of the king, but also for being a charitable person. She would do a lot of charity work, donate to hospitals in São Paulo. While they were together, while she was with Dom Pedro, she lived in Rio with him. And they had 3 kids, bastard children. But all 3 children went to Europe to study, had a very good life, you know. And we know about their affair because we had the letters they would exchange, which were very passionate letters, very intense. And also the fights were very intense from the letters. And they ended up their relationship in a big fight after 8 years together. And then she came to live here for the rest of her life. And Dom Pedro ended up going back to Portugal because he was kicked out of the throne. So let's go for it.